It was Christmas night. The whole family was gathered around the dinner table, exchanging dazzling gifts. Lena, my husband Marcus's younger sister, walked over with a mysterious look on her face and handed me a box wrapped in shimmering metallic paper. Her voice was soft, tinged with sarcasm. "You should open it right away." I gently untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of divorce papers already signed, bearing Marcus's signature. He didn't say a word, just bowed his head. Lena smiled and leaned in to whisper in my ear, "He was never yours." I remained calm, pulled a pale yellow folder from my handbag, and handed it to her. "I think you'll be quite impressed with my gift, too." Lena opened the folder with trembling hands. Her fingers fumbled, as if she had lost control of her own body. She kept flipping through the pages, but her fingers resisted, as though they refused to touch what was about to be exposed. I watched her from behind, sensing the panic in every movement she made. Her eyes darted back and forth like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. She knew she was standing at the edge of a cliff, but couldn't bring herself to face the truth. The entire room seemed to grow denser, the air thick and suffocating, and I could feel the erratic pounding of her heart. Then, when the third page turned, everything collapsed. A sharp scream rang out, startling me, but I felt nothing except cold detachment. That scream was like an alarm bell, freezing the room in an instant. She dropped the papers and clutched her chest, as if trying to protect herself from the horror that had just been revealed. Her face went pale as paper, drained of all color, sweat pouring from her forehead and soaking her hair. Her lips trembled uncontrollably, unable to form words, only choked sobs escaping. I looked at her without the slightest pity. Her panic was undeniable proof of what she had done, and I had been ready for this moment. She staggered backward, eyes wide, seemingly unable to comprehend what she was seeing. She wanted to deny it, to find some explanation, but everything was too clear. Every piece of evidence, every word in that file was a fatal blow, the end of all the lies she and Marcus had built. At that very moment, Marcus, the man I had once trusted completely, suddenly jumped to his feet. His face was ashen, lifeless, his body rigid like a corpse. He lunged toward Lena and snatched the papers from her hands, his own hands trembling uncontrollably. His fingers skimmed each line, but his eyes were wild with panic, searching desperately for a way out, for some excuse that could justify everything that had happened. But there was none. Every line in that file was a slap to his face, every word a step deeper into the pit he had dug for himself. I stood still, unmoving, my eyes fixed on the scene before me. All emotion, all pain within me had vanished. Only calm remained, a cold calm. Every moment was the result of months of meticulous preparation, of countless sleepless nights, of relentless investigation. These pieces of evidence weren't found by chance. Every document, every video had been the product of my tireless effort, and now the truth was revealed. Page by page, photo by photo, piece by piece, the dark secrets I had worked so hard to uncover came to light. A video clip from the hotel's security camera showed Marcus and Lena walking hand in hand into the same room late at night. That image hit me like a sharp blade, each painful moment I had once been blind to, now crystal clear. That scene would haunt me forever, whether I wanted it to or not, because it could no longer be hidden. Then came the bank statements, proving money had been withdrawn from the company I had built. The money I had worked so hard to earn was stolen without my knowledge, all to fund the sinful relationship between Marcus and Lena. The numbers on those statements didn't lie. They were undeniable proof of their betrayal. That money wasn't just financial, it was trust. It was the sweat of my labor, and it had been stolen without a shred of humanity. Then there was the forged apartment contract in Fort Lauderdale, under my name, for an apartment I had never heard of. That property was purchased with illegal funds, and all related documents had been forged so skillfully I hadn't noticed until everything unraveled. Facing me now, Marcus and Lena had not only betrayed me emotionally, but also financially. They had used my name for shady transactions, and I was the last to know. Finally, there were the illegal financial transactions under Lena and Marcus's names, traces of illicit investments I never could have imagined. Each sum of money was a crime, each trail a life ruined. What I saw in those documents wasn't just about money, it was my trust, the values I had built, now torn to shreds. Lena couldn't utter a word. She stood frozen, as if trapped in time, her eyes wide, lifeless, unable to believe what she was seeing. She just stood there, motionless, unable to move, unable to argue. All her justifications, all the lies she had built meant nothing now. Every word she might have said drowned beneath the sea of evidence I had gathered. All she could do was stand there, her trembling hands clenched tightly as if trying to hold on to something already lost. But it was far too late. Each piece of evidence was a nail hammered into the coffin of our relationship. And Lena, someone I once considered a sister, was now nothing more than a traitor. She was no longer someone I loved. But I didn't stop there. Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, I walked toward my father-in-law, Harold, holding a USB flash drive in my hand like it was something sacred, something that carried secrets capable of changing all our lives forever. I handed it to him with absolute resolve, without hesitation. My eyes didn't blink, cold, void of pity or weakness. My voice, though calm, was heavy, as if each word pushed the truth closer to everyone in the room. You should watch this. Harold looked at me for a moment. His eyes were full of caution, but there was also something in them, as if he already suspected what was about to happen. It was as though he knew this moment was inevitable. He slowly took the USB drive without saying a word. Only silence remained. The kind of heavy silence that belongs to a man who has lived through decades, but now must confront an undeniable truth. A truth no one in this family could turn away from anymore. Harold opened his laptop, plugged in the USB, and waited. Within seconds, the screen came to life. All of us focused on it. No one dared blink or look away. And then an unbelievable scene appeared. Marcus and Lena, hand in hand, walking into a hotel room in the middle of the night without any attempt to hide. They walked in like a pair of lovers, intoxicated, utterly unafraid of being seen. They ignored the world around them, eyes locked on each other, stepping through those doors as if into a private garden made only for them. Each frame passed clearly, as sharp and vivid as daylight, like a scar that would never fade in my heart. Their footsteps into the room, their hands tightly clasped, were the most undeniable signs of betrayal. Marcus, my husband, the man I once loved and trusted with all my heart, now stood there, beside his own sister, hand in hand, sharing an intimate moment I had never known existed. Every image, every movement between them was a punch to my heart, and I couldn't block a single one. My mother-in-law, Estelle, sat frozen like stone, her eyes wide open, filled with shock and pain. She stared at the screen, but the difference between her gaze and mine was stark. In my eyes, there was no surprise, only the coldness of someone who had prepared for this moment. In Estelle's eyes, however, a storm of emotion surged: disappointment, sorrow, and disbelief. She no longer recognized her own son. Her hands trembled, unable to withstand the weight of the truth. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she couldn't say a word. Powerless, she could only shake her head silently, unable to accept what she was witnessing. Estelle's voice quivered, weak, confused, uncontrollable. What? What the hell is this? I didn't respond immediately. I wouldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. I stood there, shockingly composed, as if I weren't the one facing this ultimate betrayal. Each word I spoke rang out clearly, unwavering, like the final sentence that would end everything. Criminal charges have been filed for fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. The arrest warrants have been signed. The room fell completely silent. No one said a word. Not a sound could be heard, only the stares, all directed at Marcus, who stood with his head bowed, unable to face the truth. He couldn't argue, couldn't run. The fear slowly consumed him, but it was too late. Everything was already far too late. Harold sat silently, his eyes fixed on the screen, and then the lines on his face began to change. The wrinkles of age seemed to deepen as he looked at his son. The gentleness of a father was gone. There was no trace of forgiveness. He rose slowly, each step deliberate, as if to affirm the weight behind his words. He looked directly at Marcus, his eyes cold and merciless, as though everything had already been decided. His voice rang out, firm and final, like an unchangeable sentence. From now on, I no longer have a son named Marcus. His words struck like thunder, crashing down into Marcus's mind. He stepped back, as if trying to avoid his father's gaze, but he couldn't. Each step felt heavy, as if carrying a mountain on his back. He wanted to turn away, but there was nowhere left to go. Marcus no longer had a place in this family. He was no longer Harold's son, no longer my husband, and no longer the man I once trusted. My mother-in-law, Estelle, couldn't bear it any longer. She sprang to her feet, hastily wiping away her tears, but she couldn't get a word out. She looked at Marcus, but her eyes no longer held any love, only deep pain and an indescribable disappointment. Her hands trembled, as if wanting to reach out and hold onto her son, but she couldn't. Her love had died the moment the truth came to light. She had already lost her son. Lena, standing beside him, was completely silent. She still tried to keep her composure, but I could see the panic clearly in her eyes. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but there were no words that could salvage this moment. Every excuse she might offer now was just an echo in the air. No one cared to hear it. I didn't need to say another word. I didn't need to prove anything more. Everything was already too clear. The truth had been exposed. Nothing could be hidden anymore. What I needed had been confirmed. All the pain, all the betrayal. It was finally time to pay the price. A sudden knock at the door shattered the tension like a crack of lightning. 3 police officers entered, their uniforms like imposing shadows, solemn, severe, and full of authority. Their faces showed no emotion, no sympathy or hesitation. They walked forward with steady steps, not hurried, but full of certainty. Without a greeting or introduction, they went directly to Marcus and calmly handcuffed him, their cold eyes unwavering. One officer stood upright, looked Marcus in the eye, and stated in a dry, emotionless voice, "Marcus Bennett, you are under arrest for crimes related to financial fraud." That sentence struck the room like a gavel's blow in a freezing courtroom. Each word pierced straight to my core. I didn't feel joy or victory, only a vague sense of relief, knowing that justice had been done. But that feeling was quickly drowned by disappointment as I watched the man I once loved being handcuffed like a caged animal. Lena couldn't bear the scene. She rushed toward the officers, her hands flailing as if to push them away, but no one paid any attention to her resistance. She screamed, her voice slicing through the air, full of rage and bitterness. "It's all her fault." She pointed at me, as if trying to dump all the blame on my shoulders. But her words meant nothing now, just the flailing of someone who had been exposed. She couldn't stand the fact that she and Marcus had been revealed in their vile scheme. I felt no anger. Anger is the weakness of those who don't know how to face the truth. I looked at her, my gaze still cold, unwavering. No argument was needed, no defense. I replied calmly, my voice low, resolute. "I didn't do anything. I just let justice do its job." Lena froze, her eyes briefly flickering with confusion, but she wasn't strong enough to accept the truth. She just stood there, staring at me, as if searching for some explanation, some excuse to deny what was happening. But there was nothing left to say. Everything was already laid bare. My mother-in-law, Estelle, could no longer hold herself together. Until now, she had always been the one to stay silent, always the one to try and mend things within the family. But today, faced with a betrayal too great and a pain too deep to endure, she broke down. She stood up, her hands trembling uncontrollably, overcome with emotion. Without a word, she raised her hand and slapped Lena hard across the face. The slap rang out like thunder, filled with rage and fury. Lena stumbled backward, clutching her face, unable to believe what had just happened. The entire room fell silent, with only the sound of my mother-in-law's heavy breathing remaining. Estelle couldn't endure any longer. That slap wasn't just physical. It was an emotional jolt. She had grown too weary of everything Marcus and Lena had done, and she could no longer forgive them. Harold, standing at a distance, still had that cold look in his eyes. There was no pity, no trace of a father's compassion. He looked at Marcus and Lena with an undisguised hatred. He took one step forward, his gaze fixed coldly on the two of them, and said a short but resolute sentence. "You did this filth. Don't blame anyone else." His voice did not waver, not a hint of softness. It was the voice of a man utterly exhausted, deeply disappointed. He could no longer defend these vile actions. His words cut through Marcus and Lena like a knife to the heart. They had no response, nothing left to say. Only silence remained. Marcus turned to his mother, his eyes filled with panic and desperation. His eyes widened, as if hoping to find forgiveness, some protection from the mother he had hurt for so many years. He hoped she would understand, that she would forgive, but it was far too late. My mother-in-law looked at her son, but there was no love in her eyes. Only tears fell, each one a farewell and unspeakable sorrow. She shook her head, her voice choked with grief. "I don't even recognize who you are anymore." She said nothing more. Her final words were a sentence in themselves. All forgiveness, all affection had vanished. No one could save Marcus now. No one could save Lena. The truth had been laid bare, and they had to face the consequences of their own actions. In the end, Marcus was sentenced to 5 years in prison after pleading guilty. The prison doors closed behind him, and his life turned to a new page, one where there was no room for hope or redemption. Once a man who had everything, a family, a career, and wealth, now he had nothing but the cold walls of prison and endless nights without light. The dreams he once had were now only blurry shadows in his mind. Each day was a tiring weight, a loneliness that could never be filled. I felt nothing when I thought of him anymore. No anger, no hatred, only emptiness. His betrayal had been more than enough for me to understand. Once the truth is faced, everything can be shattered. My mother-in-law, Estelle, never visited Marcus, not even once. She was too tired, too heartbroken by what her son had done. A woman who had always sacrificed for her family now had nothing left but unbearable pain. After all the years of care and love, she was forced to face a devastating truth. She could not forgive, could not comprehend how Marcus could betray the family to such a degree. Estelle had lived her entire life for those she loved, but now she had no love left for her son. Disappointment and sorrow filled her eyes, leaving her unable to even lift her head. As for Lena, she lost her civil lawsuit. All her attempts to fight me were in vain. She lost every bit of property she had stolen from me and Marcus, all of it confiscated. The apartments she had bought with dirty money, the bank accounts she had secretly drained, all came under legal scrutiny. Lena now had nothing left. Everything she once saw as power, as freedom, had vanished. She had no influence left to cling to. She didn't just lose her money. She lost the freedom she thought she controlled. For me, everything seemed to have ended, but it was really the beginning of a new chapter in my life. After selling the old house, the place filled with painful memories of Marcus and the years I lived in lies, I decided to move to Manhattan. That house, no matter its material value, was the place where I had lost myself. It was where I had placed all my trust in someone unworthy, and now I no longer wanted to carry anything from that past with me. I just wanted to begin again, to find myself, and to build a future I truly deserved. Manhattan was a strange place, but also full of promise. The city was always lively, always busy, but it never made me feel alone. The small apartment I bought wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, built from my own choices. In that apartment, I began to realize that even when life is full of surprises and hardships, I can still be in control. I don't need to rely on anyone, don't have to endure betrayal or pain from anyone ever again. That feeling was truly wonderful. My business, after years of struggle and uncertainty, is now thriving more than ever. Former clients are returning, and new partners are seeking me out. I've learned how to stand firm, not just in business, but in life. The days of pain and betrayal are now valuable lessons. I've learned not to let emotions control me. I've learned to let reason guide my decisions, so no one can ever again disrupt my life. And for the first time in so many years, I feel true peace. A peace not born from having a perfect family, nor from the material things I once dreamed of. That Christmas gift, though it seemed like a painful goodbye, was actually a triumph of truth. It didn't just free me from the ghosts of the past. It helped me find myself again, helped me rediscover the strength to live and build a new future. The truth has been exposed. Nothing can be hidden anymore, and I've received the freedom I deserve. That Christmas gift wasn't just a sudden farewell to Marcus and Lena, it was my victory. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to cry or drown in sorrow. All I needed was release, the freedom to restart my life. And now, I feel it. I live for myself, for my own dreams, and I am no longer bound by those who betrayed me. That sense of peace, I had never known it before. And as I stood at the window of my new apartment, looking out at the vast city of Manhattan, I understood that this Christmas gift had given me something far greater, a rebirth. As I stood at the window of my new apartment, looking out at the vast expanse of Manhattan, an indescribable feeling swept over me. This city, with its towering skyscrapers, tangled traffic, and brilliant lights, was like a boundless ocean of opportunity. Every light was a dream, a story, a separate journey of the people who live here. For years, I had grown used to loneliness, betrayal, and pain. But now, all of that felt like it had sunk to the bottom of a deep sea. I was no longer entangled in the past, no longer bound by painful memories. I stood there in the vastness of this city and felt like someone newly born, someone free from the shackles of the past. The past is over. Although I know the wounds in my heart will never fully heal, I also know that I've learned how to move forward, how to love myself again. The days I once spent grappling with betrayal and hardship have now become precious lessons. Every painful moment taught me something, that I could be stronger, that I didn't have to endure forever. I remember the long nights in the old house, the nights when I tried to keep everything peaceful, covering up the cracks in my relationship with Marcus. I didn't realize then that, during all that time, I had lost myself. I was living in a relationship where I no longer existed as me. And when I look back now, I realize that walking away wasn't a defeat. It was a victory, a liberation for myself. Manhattan welcomed me like an old friend. This city didn't rush me, didn't pressure me to keep up with its fast-paced rhythm. It gave me time, gave me space to rediscover who I was. Every day, I've learned to appreciate moments of peace, the small, priceless moments in this new life. Every morning, when the first light of day shines through my window, I know I am alive, truly alive. Not just existing, but living the life I deserve. With my business, I've begun to feel a clear shift. It's not just about the growth in projects, it's in how I view life and work. The people around me, partners and clients, can feel the change too. I'm no longer the woman of those dark days, filled with worry and fear. I've become more confident, stronger, and more creative than ever. I've started rebuilding everything from the ground up, from my work to my personal life. And most importantly, I've started to believe in myself again. I no longer feel lonely. I no longer need someone else to validate my worth. I am who I am, and I deserve all the best life has to offer. For the first time in many years, I felt as if I had found something more precious than anything else: freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from walking away from those who betrayed me, but a freedom that comes from within my own soul. Nothing could bind me anymore. Nothing could make me afraid or cause me to doubt myself. I knew I could create a new life, a life I truly deserved. As I stood at the window of my new apartment, looking out at the vast city of Manhattan, I realized that this Christmas gift wasn't just a farewell to the past. It was a rebirth, a priceless gift I had given myself. The gift of freedom, of courage, and of belief in myself. I had walked through all the pain, all the losses, and now I had stretched beyond it all, reaching for my own dreams. That Christmas gift, though it may have appeared like an ending, was truly the beginning of a new journey. And now, I know that everything I've been through, every hardship and every trial, was a stepping stone that helped me stand taller, grow stronger, and keep living the life I am worthy of living.